Welcome to episode 87 of the XrmToolCast. In this episode, Scott and I talked to Phil Cole about sticking your PowerFx where it doesn't belong. Phil is a longtime listener and has been putting out a couple of blogs about using the PowerFx open source libraries and then being able to call them from places you wouldn't expect to be able to call them for. So we definitely get off into a couple great tangents, end up somewhere around trying to figure out how regular expressions work, which may be a little bit off the deep end, but I thoroughly enjoyed it and I think you will too. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XrmToolCast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott Power Lemmings Drew. Scott, how's it going?
Very good, Daryl. Yes, from last week.
Yes, Power Lemmings. I was going to do it.
Yes, you did, and you delivered. You delivered.
Always fulfill my promises.
Yeah, it was funny. So many people come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the Power Lemmings guy." It's like, really? That's where my career has got to?
That's the app. Not PowerType. PowerType is okay. Maybe it's not quite as impressive as Power Lemmings, but I used it in my demo this week. So
I saw Jonas. Yeah, he posted a little photograph of it. That was cool. Yeah. How did it go then last week at the summit?
Yeah, it was. It feels less like a developer conference every year. So last year it felt pretty good, actually. This year it felt way less than last year. So
that was awesome last year, because we were together, right? And we did the podcast together in person, and that was awesome.
That was awesome. I had Jonas there this year, so I had,
exactly,
another level of awesomeness. But it just I had two sessions. One of my sessions, it has my favorite slide ever. We're talking about plugins, and I have a quote from I attribute to Jonas. It says, "You can never have too much of a good thing except when it comes to early bound." And then I put it then I had to cross it out, say no, Jonas would never say that. But I think I had like 8 people in that session. 2 of them had been in the same session 3 years earlier. So I was like, okay, well,
just a refresher. Just a refresher.
No.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. Well, I was talking a lot. Really less about, kind of pro dev stuff when I was doing my sessions. And I was talking much more about the kind of the low code and PowerFx. Yeah. And a little segue there into our guest. So
I love how
Phil.
You make the segue and then you draw out that you are making that like maybe I'm not picking it up. I'm not quite sure what you're thinking, but yes. Our topic for today, our guest today is Phil Cole, a senior consultant at Tech Labs in London. At least that's what his LinkedIn profile says. Maybe it's changed since then. I don't know. He's contributed to the show ideas and some other things anonymously before. So appreciate that. And he's been doing, I'll say you, because now I'm talking to you, Phil. Phil, you've been doing some very interesting things with PowerFx. Things like, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of doing that. Or, what else can we do with this? Or what else? It's kind of like, it feels almost like we're abusing it because it's not what Microsoft probably intended it for, but it really isn't abusing it, though. We're using it, so we're extending it, right? So Phil, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. It's I'm a bit of a big fan, so yeah, I'm always watching them. So yeah, very nice to be asked on. Thanks.
So I saw your recent blog article, and I was seeing you on the Discord channel for what is it? I can't remember the name of it. I should remember the name of it. It's like just Power Platform Level Up. It's that simple. Level Up. It's simple. The Power Platform Level Up Discord channel, and doing some things interesting with PowerFx. So let's start at the kind of the base level. So some people may use PowerFx and not even know what it is, and it's the language that Canvas apps low code is. So the low code language is PowerFx. It's very Excel-like and all that kind of fun stuff. And right now, the only place it lives within Microsoft is within Canvas apps and within the new formulated formula fields in Dataverse, as well as are in preview now, and then also in the buttons, right, Scott? There's use in there as well. Anywhere else I'm missing that we're that we see PowerFx?
I think
There's a preview talking about, isn't there, about going to be used for business rules. That's another place.
All right.
Yeah.
Place.
Phil, you were
All
going to say, is there another place?
I think it's in PowerFx Agents as well. It's coming in.
Oh yes, you're right. Absolutely. Yeah, that came out quite recently. That's quite cool.
So Phil, you've taken this low code language that is more accessible to more and more devs, and maybe some of these higher code languages are, and now you're sticking it in places it doesn't belong. So where are you? What have you done with it? How do you make it work? And then where are we using it? Yes, let's start with that. How do you get to use PowerFx anywhere?
Well,
how do you
I
do
think
that?
the starter for my sort of journey with this, and I've only done 2 blog posts, and they've been like 8 months apart or something like that. So it's do a little bit, put it down, and start again. But the starter was Microsoft released the open source PowerFx library. So it's like, okay, and they on GitHub, and they put a CLI on a CLI REPL on it, so you could just type in some PowerFx and it would give you the outcome. So 1 + 1, and it'd give you 2. And then you could just use that on the command line. And then it's like, how can we get this into and use that in an easier way? Particularly, I always find that the expression language in flows is an outlier from everything else in the platform. It's in Logic Apps, but it's dissimilar for everything else. Like TypeScript's quite well known, JavaScript's quite well known, but that's not as well known as everything else. And that's where I thought, well, can you even start using it in there? And that's where my starting point for it was. And so that was making a custom connector for it, which at the time you had to use that. The package from Microsoft was the PowerFx package was a NuGet package. So you had to try and make that accessible in some way to the Power Platform. And the only way of doing that was by hosting it maybe in an Azure function or somewhere else, and then connecting to it with a custom connector, so you can make that API available to the Power Platform. And that was my first attempt at doing it.
And that was in Flows then, or in Power Automate then? That was where you're using it from?
So yeah, it was an Azure function, and then you had a custom connector, and you could use that from within wherever you can use custom connector. So, but my example was from within a Cloudflow. So you pass it a little bit of JSON, so there's the setup for it, so the variables that you want to declare, and then you pass another parameter, or another field which has got the actual PowerFx code in there, and then it goes away. It consumes both of those, runs the Azure function, and gives you a JSON output, which is the variables at the end of your calculation, at the end of the calculation, and then you can do what you like with that in the rest of the flow.
Yeah,
that was the starting point, and then I then roll on till a few weeks ago, and it was a couple of months ago, I think, Microsoft actually released the dependent assemblies within plugins. So you could then use any other sort of NuGet package and build a plugin package with it, which is all still in preview, as is the NuGet package for PowerFx. So this is all very preview stuff. Don't use it in production. But
preview merged with a preview, married to a preview with a hack of a preview.
Exactly. So yeah, preview squared.
It's ready for prod. I don't have any problems.
So with the disadvantage of Azure function is you've got to run Azure function. It's not ALM aware. You have to manually or set up a separate pipeline to get that into the different environments to make it match if you wanted to develop it. But if you can put something within a solution or within a plugin, and then distribute that via the solution framework, then it's all ALM friendly, and that's a big win in my mind, anyway.
Yeah.
So the dependent assemblies functionality allows you to use any NuGet package, and it could be, there are examples from Microsoft of using Newtonsoft, but the examples or the scenario I was using was needing to use 3 packages, which is the PowerFx NuGet package, which Microsoft had up versioned to version 0.2.3 by that time, and then .NET YAML, which is a YAML parser, and then Newtonsoft as well to actually parse some of the JSON. So those 3 dependent assembly, or those 3 NuGet packages, could be consumed alongside some normal plugin code, and it's really quite simple to actually to use those NuGet packages, with a slight exception for PowerFx. But then once you've done that, it'll give you a NuGet package at the end of that, and then using the new plugin registration tool, which has got extra functionality in it to handle these plugin packages, you can register that a plugin package inside of Dataverse and put it in a solution, and then you have a plugin that accepts some that you can then hook up to a custom API in the platform. So there's a lot of steps and a lot of bits involved in this, but you can hook that up to a custom API in the platform, and then using the Dataverse connector inside of Flow, you can call that custom API and do the same sort of thing that we were doing before. So then you can access this. It's the same parameters, so the JSON context, and then a YAML section where it's just got PowerFx in it, and then you can call that custom API. It'll go and calculate the PowerFx and then return that back to wherever it's been called from. And you could call that from with it wherever you can call a custom API from. So that's with the Dataverse connector in Flow, you can do that from anywhere within a Cloudflow. You could do that from within the Web API, calling using executing an action or calling an action, custom API, same sort of thing. You could even do it externally, so just an external Web API calling to Dataverse to do the same sorts of things. So, or I think you could probably even call it from inside a Canvas app. I haven't tried that yet, but then you could call.
Why not? Yeah.
PowerFx inside PowerFx.
Yes. PowerFx section here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm gonna walk that back a little bit because there's a lot going on. So you have no, it's fine. You have the PowerFX assembly that they give us a NuGet package. Say, hey, if you want to utilize this outside, do it. And in order to utilize that, you have some JSON that's your context, what variables we want to define, and then you have your PowerFX code, and then you have a response, which is the JSON, which is again, whatever parameter, whatever variables you've defined, and whatever the end values are. So you have like beginning state, the actual code, and then the end state, and that's basically your interface you have with it. So you obviously don't get any of the fun GUI features that you get in Canvas apps or IntelliSense or anything like that. You're just, it's like JavaScript, right? Where you don't get any IntelliSense, right? Back in the day. So
JavaScript inside Notepad.
Yeah, inside a Notepad. JavaScript inside a Notepad is what it is. Yes. So you can go through and create that, and then it's just okay. How are you hosting that? You did it first in Azure Functions, worked fine, and then now with the new preview, not quite the go live yet, but preview, you can wrap that up into an actual Dataverse plugin assembly and throw it out as an API, plugin API, so that way you can call it from anywhere you want to call it from. And so you can wrap that in your connector, and then you're done. You can do it that way as well. So okay, that's I figured that was kind of how you would do it, but there's so many things with the word preview in there. I hadn't tried, I think, any of them. So the fact that you went through and did all of them was the part that I found really impressive. So did you have a purpose for it, or just to see if you could? Is this the Jurassic Park issue we have going on here?
It's definitely a Jurassic Park, and it's definitely a should you do this, because there's potentially you could write really bad PowerFx and you can write really long PowerFxes that take minutes to run, and then you've got a problem in your plugin. You don't really want that, so it should be used with care. But I find that if new stuff comes out, play with it, and then you know how the Lego set can be put together, because that's the platform really. And same with Azure, like all different bits in Azure. How do these talk to each other? And just trying it out and seeing. It was how can we use this? What can you do with it? Because then you can maybe find a real use for it later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice, Phil. Actually, saying, to reserve some time to play around with things. I think that's one of those, people sometimes think it's a luxury, but actually reserving some time in your week or your month, just carving out that time just to try things out, you get a lot of benefit from that. It just opens up ideas and you can kind of explore things. And yeah, that's really good. I've got a suggestion and maybe get your thoughts on it. One of the common things I hear a lot about is for people wanting to, specifically in maybe like a CRM system, like customize certain rules around like pricing, quoting, those kind of things. And quite often, they'll have like an Excel spreadsheet that they'll say, hey, look, can you convert this Excel spreadsheet into it? And you look at it and you go, man, there's so much calculations going in. There's so much complexity. And the thing is, well, yeah, sure, I could convert it, but then
it's going to change.
If you ever needed to change it, well, come back and then we'll have another sort of 2 months to do that. So, whereas obviously in Excel, it's so quick to do it. So can you see the kind of technique that you just described there being useful for that scenario?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was wondering about doing that and using that in sort of a product based. So if you've got some sort of criteria or conditionality that you want to make dynamic and usable by different people and changeable over time, then yeah, if there was a plugin that actually went off and executed that little bit of PowerFx and then did the output, then somebody's got their own customizable little piece of business logic in there, which they don't have to come back and it's okay. It's not solution aware, but if that's something that they want to use in sort of a formula or a financial route or something along those, then yeah, totally can see a use for it like that. Obviously, there's the editor piece which needs to be sorted out because it's not very friendly to edit. It's okay for if conditions, things like that, but when it gets more complicated, then yeah, it's problematic there.
And the pro coder won't even do it because it's too complicated.
It's like, whoa.
You've asked can we do it? And now you've realized no, you shouldn't do it.
But there is a Monaco editor, I think, for PowerFx, which potentially you could hook up to it. I don't know. I think you need a language server on the back of it to be able to understand the PowerFx, and so then you've got other infrastructure, and you're back to the Azure function problem again. So it's probably something that's beyond the scope of ease of use to actually to do within the platform, ALM anyway, within the platform solution. So
I wonder if you would host something like that in the Monaco in the Xrm Toolbox and be able to have your own little Xrm Toolbox editor for it.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
The Monaco editor does like syntax highlighting quite easy, but then if you want to have any like IntelliSense and stuff like that, that's kind of much more complex because you need to actually have sort of actually picking up all of the different keywords and then dynamically running expressions and all that kind of stuff. But there's North 52 Formula Manager is a product which it's kind of springs to mind because I've used that in the past, and it's almost like that would seem like low-hanging fruit for John Grace. I know him very well, to kind of put in a PowerFx formula inside North 52 Formula Manager. That would kind of seem quite a good idea.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be and then you're hooking in with all the rest of the goodness that Microsoft keep adding into, because the NuGet library for PowerFx is getting more and more functions being added into it. So you just as that grows, then you'd benefit from all of that as well.
The ISV story, because I was talking to Mike Stool at the Power Platform conference, and who's the PowerFx one of the PowerFx architects, and Greg Lindhorst as well, of course, kind of personal hero of mine, and so just fanboying people, but the story around PowerFx is very much that it's trying to become a kind of an open source language, which is beyond the Power Platform even. And so they're trying to encourage people to use the SDK to actually build products with PowerFx, because then as people start to use it, then it will become greater than just the Power Platform itself and become something that can, be developed independently. And I think that's suddenly when that starts to take off, I think we'll see a lot of investment in the platform using it.
So Phil, the idea of running a formula makes sense to me, but what about like connectors and like retrieving data? Like, is that something that you can do within it as well, or is there take a whole lot of setup in order to like set up a connector to like access?
Yeah, that's beyond my understanding at the moment. I would say I know that you can add functions into the PowerFx language, but what you do with those, that's beyond. I've just gone with very simple Microsoft examples. Can I use this? Can I put it together? I mean, what Mike Stall and Greg are doing, they're geniuses compared to me. I'm just playing with the Lego blocks. so it's a whole different ballgame when you get up there, get to that. So yeah,
because if you subscribe to the RSS feed of the GitHub repository for PowerFX, it's almost like you've got a sort of an early look into what's coming into Canvas apps, because features get put into the Power Apps language before it actually gets to Canvas apps. So you see things going in there. So it's a really interesting way of looking at it.
There's a good discussion forum on the PowerFx pages, PowerFx GitHub as well. It's got a load of little tips and tricks, which I thought was a goldmine when I got shown what that was. So, yeah, it's definitely.
Well, that's cool, because then it does mean that it's becoming something that's beyond just Canvas apps itself. Okay, so here's an idea then, Phil, for you to do some homework. All right. So you were saying about the fact that the editor and everything, it's difficult to do with the kind of Monaco and stuff. How about this, right? How about using Canvas apps to actually author your PowerFX, and then using pack canvas unpack to unpack it into YAML, and then extracting out the PowerFX, and then being able to then extract it out and create the JSON for your connector automatically.
Yeah, that's cool. That's an idea. Yeah, bing.
I love all the homework we're giving, Phil. This is awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of homework in that, but
just got to do this and that and the other thing. Yeah, I had a really interesting question at the summit from an end user. They're like, we have records that get created in prod that we want to immediately create with the GUIDs, the same GUIDs in a lower environment. And how would you do that without coding? There's a possible to do without coding. And I was like, ooh, I'm not sure. The idea that I came up with was to use the data configuration migration tool in Azure DevOps. And when the record gets created in prod, it runs a flow that then calls the Azure DevOps pipeline that then will suck it out of one environment, put it in the, like, that was the best I could come up with. But outside of that, but my answer to him was, I would just do it manually whenever it needs to get done, which probably wouldn't be that often. But it was an interesting question, I thought. So,
yeah, I suppose you could use process automation to kind of export the data and then import the data with the GUIDs.
Yeah,
the GUIDs is kind of the hard part, though, right?
Well, I guess the GUIDs I think are maintained if you use the package deployer and put the configuration migration tool, but that's all pretty hard code, hardcore stuff as well. So but it's doable. But yeah, I think the configuration migration tool, the UI in the front of that's not too bad.
But with the RPA, you could use robotic process automation to actually kick off the configuration migration tool, export, and then import.
This is turning into George Dubinsky's, like, he wanted to have some Cloudflow back in the day that like used every single connector and a Rube Goldberg kind of machine to finally get to where it was. So.
Like HTTP by carrier pigeon implementation.
Yes. yes. That'd be awesome.
TCP by carrier pigeon. Yeah.
So, do we have any other ideas of what we could do with this power? Other places that we could utilize utilize this. I'm just thinking of like, I mean, you could create your own calculated fields if you wanted to, probably. Like right now, the formula fields in our preview don't support. They don't support money.
Yep.
Money's not supported.
Or choices, which is annoying.
Or choices.
And decimal, whole numbers too. So there's a lot of and dates. So
yeah.
I spent some time trying to use the formula field to solve the problem I was having, where I had 5 different fields I wanted to add together in a calculated field, but there's no like null coalescing operator in a calculated operation. So I was hoping I could use PowerFx to do that, but then I realized, oh, they're money, so I can't do that. So I got annoyed that I spent all the time doing that. But hey, I learned how to get the preview feature and use it, so that's good. So that's something I can add to my toolbox. But yeah, so I wrote the ugliest calculated field formula ever. I have, I think, 25 if statements or 30 if statements to go through. I have to check, are all of them a value? Good, add them all. Or is one of them missing? All right, and so you had to go through all of those things. So, yeah. So
see the size of the XAML that's output from that.
Oh yeah, that.
Ginormous.
I got about 10 if statements in. I was like, is there a way I could just edit and create the XAML? And I was like, no. Nope,
well, that's what's so cool about PowerFx. You know, it's funny how before, you know, back in the day, about configuration, it was all about, okay, how do we create a user interface to, you know, to make if statements and make it really easy for users. But in actual fact, creating a user interface to create a query, whilst it might seem to be easy, it actually ends up making it a lot harder, because in the long run, because you've got to then maintain it. You can't, it's very difficult to edit it. You can't copy and paste it. Whereas people have been using Excel for, you know, decades, and no one's said, oh, we need a visual designer to create like an Excel formula. You just write it in the formula bar, you know, no big deal, right? You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, PowerFX is like, you know, just write the formula. There we go.
I think that the nice usage at the moment of, and I think that one of the things that I managed to do with the later version of the without the custom connector, the plugin version of it, is to actually use some of the Expando functionality, which I didn't know existed beforehand. So previously you had to use parse JSON to actually get the output of the each of the variables and into your flow and use it. But with the Expando stuff, it just becomes available to use within the next step within the Cloudflow. So I know, because I Ignite, I managed to get a text question into Stephen Siciliano, and he said, what's the future with PowerFX in Cloudflow? And it's definitely coming, but it's not this year. So I mean, that what all the stuff that I'm doing here is, especially within the PowerFX within Cloudflows, is definitely going to be a better way of doing it from Microsoft in the long term. So this is a hack for the moment, but use cases of it elsewhere in the platform, like Scott mentioned, for variable fields or variable formulas, that's a really good use case for it. So, but
it's funny you just mentioned something there about the Expando functionality, and it always makes me think of, like, you know, Expando being like a member of the X-Men or the Incredibles or something.
I was thinking like a roofing product you'd buy at a home improvement store or something. You should pick up the Expando we need for the roof. Like, yeah, but okay.
Maybe you could just, like, you know, if any listeners have not kind of seen the Expando stuff, you could summarize it, Phil?
Yeah, sorry. It normally, especially, I didn't realize this, and this is all down to Danish, Power Maverick, and what was meant, the stuff that's mentioned on the Level Up, Power Platform Level Up Discord channel. So I've learned so much on there, so it's really good. Become a member, join up, whatever. But the Expando functionality is you can create it's a C# actual class, but it allows you to add members to the C# class dynamically without having to use the older, I think, dynamic type in C#. And the nice thing about that is that the platform understands Expando, and it will output those as individual fields in the output of a plugin, and it won't need to have them compressed into or serialized into a JSON string. They can just be properties of the response. So it's much simpler to use that within PowerFx. But there are some limitations with it, depending on the type of fields, and Expando doesn't do everything. So there's limitations on, I think, like if you wanted to do a list of numbers, then you end up with a large output. So it's a sort of a hack. In some use cases it's useful, sometimes not, maybe. Again, it was just a learning thing. Can I do this in a better way than serialized JSON? But again, coming back to it now, there's the new JSON and parse JSON within PowerFx, so you could maybe use it directly within PowerFx and not have to worry about that step. So it's again, which part of the toolkit do you want to use to meet the need that you've got? That's trying to keep up to date with everything is a bit of a challenge at the moment, because Microsoft it's a bit of a fire hose of new stuff. It's really cool, but trying to keep up to date with it is all. So, yeah.
If you keep this up, we're gonna have to call you like the new Phil hack or something.
Yes. Phil hack, yeah. Coding horror fame, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so you're both
much.
No.
But the Expando stuff is almost like early bound, late bound kind of conversations. I've had conversations with people about that. It's almost as heated. I mean, obviously not as heated as managed, unmanaged, but
So what's the conversation there? Is it people say it's a good thing or a bad thing, or?
Well, there's like two people. There's different camps, right? Some people say, having a dynamic schema is not necessarily a good thing because it means your contract's not fixed and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's horses for courses. There's times when you need a dynamic schema, and I think that's really what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, trying to.
So I don't think I've ever actually used the Expando object. It's just a C# construct, right? It's or C# class, right? Or is it also like something within Canvas, something within Dataverse?
It is. I'm gonna have to look at my code now. It is. It is part of. Well, the best thing to do is to look at Danish's blog, because he explains it the best. Convert Expando to entity. So you write an Expando object and then convert Expando to entity.
In the code. Okay.
I know Danish's blog post you're talking about, so we can put a link to that in the it's a good one. Yes, it really summarizes it very well. I mean, because there's been for a long time you've been able to add in custom properties to responses, but because it's like a kind of a name value pair type thing, but it just makes that a lot better, and with custom APIs it's sort of got native support, so it's really cool.
Okay. So my wheels are turning here. So the Expando object in this case allows you to, rather than having name as the first name as one field, and second name and middle name as the next field, last it's you do the Expando object and just pull them out of that object when you grab it from the calling part of the API. Then. Okay.
Yeah, so you again, it's dynamic schemas, where because I think that's the parse JSON thing in PowerFx that you were talking about, Phil. The being able to have a dynamic schema which allows you to just pass anything back, and effectively what you're doing is you're defining the schema at the point at the time you are parsing the JSON. So it's not quite like the dynamic. It's not like quite the dynamic keyword in C# where you can just sort of like you can use it as anything goes. It's like, hey, whatever you want to write. You do have to specify a schema when you're actually parsing it to get the things. But it's interesting where that's gonna. I'm interested to see where that will go. because the very nature of PowerFX is that it does need a schema to get all the IntelliSense and stuff. And but however, it's running live, right? So every time you're doing, that's what's so cool about Canvas apps and PowerFX, is that it's running while you're actually writing it. I mean, and that's like, to me, when I first did that, that was the reason that I was like, you know what? I'm a pro coder and I love C# and I love TypeScript, but this is like, you know, I'm writing code and it's executing the code and I'm immediately seeing if stuff is working or not. And, you know, and I think that's what makes it so special. So you can kind of see that the dynamic side of that can suddenly become part and parcel of the authoring experience, because you're actually making calls to the data and you're getting data back. You're making calls to flows, getting data back, and then you're seeing that response shape and then, you know, your authoring experience can respond to that. So, yeah.
I agree with your excitement over this, Scott, except in the client that I'm at right now. It's a little it's not full-time, it's a little part-time here and there. They only have a production environment. That's it. And so they had someone that spent like a year and a half writing this app, and they asked me some changes. I'm like, I can't even like open the app without knowing if it's going to like touch something in production that may or may not be a good thing or a bad thing. And you know, if I change something, like I could really mess it up because they don't have a non-production environment to do it in. So anyway, I think my first step is to, okay, let's make a copy of prod somewhere else, and then
it's like that meme I saw, you know, it's like, I don't test my code, but when I do test my code, I test it in production.
Yes. The most interesting man in the world, whatever that guy's name is for that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But the really nice thing about PowerFX is it's type safe as well, and that's cool. Or not type safe, but it understands that you're looking at an option set, or you're looking at a lookup, or those sorts of things, and that's all this stuff again is a hack, loses all of that. So that's a big
so the editing experience is cool in the Canvas app editor, but PowerFX at the core doesn't have that. I think that's really what you mean to say, because once you start using just strictly naked PowerFX without the editor, you've lost all of your fun IntelliSense stuff.
Yeah. And the C# it's an interpreter, right? So that's the C# SDK is an interpreter. It's not a compiler. So there is a subtle difference there in that respect.
I don't know if it does any clever just-in-time stuff inside it, but you have to give it each formula, and then they give it another formula, and then another formula, and then go away and evaluate, and it goes away and evaluates the suite of formulas.
Yeah. Let's call for our listeners the difference between a compiler and an interpreter, Scott.
Okay. So, I mean, I think so. If you take the example of the SDK, the PowerFX C# SDK that you're talking about, Phil, you know, it's like, well, when you send it a PowerFX expression, it's actually going to pass that expression, and it's then going to, you know, split up into all the different, you know, lexicons, and just look at the data, the context of the variables, and it's going to evaluate that expression using that string that you passed it. Whereas a compiler will take the code that you give it, and then it will change it into a different native image that then can be run on a particular platform, or at least an intermediary, like .NET. It goes into an intermediary language, which is then just in time compiled into the native platform that it's running on. So it's interesting that the C#, I think this is right anyway, Mike or Greg can probably tell us wrong, but I think the C# one is an interpreter, because I don't think it does any compilation into a native image that runs on that platform. Hence why it does, you know, it's just, you can pass it whatever and it will do. It doesn't need to have any file storage to create DLLs and stuff like that. However, the PowerFX that runs in Canvas apps, when you publish that, that's actually it's packaging up your app into a set of JavaScript, which is kind of like a compilation of that JavaScript. It's, you know, it's not kind of taking the PowerFX and running that dynamically, you know, in an interpreter kind of way, because I think there's a performance challenge with that. So I think that the Canvas app is less of an interpreter, although it is doing some interpreting. It's more of a compiler, and I think the the formula columns, and I don't know, obviously don't know how they work in the back end, but I believe that is a compiler as well, because that's outputting T-SQL that runs inside the actual, the Dataverse SQL server. It's not dynamically passing the PowerFx of that formula column every time you try and evaluate a view. And interestingly, actually, I noticed that you can sort by complex PowerFx expressions columns.
Ooh.
You can't sort by a complex calculated field, that goes and grabs a value from another column, but you can. Now, I don't know if that's intentional, because maybe it's just they just forgot that,
sooner or later they'll run into a performance problem and go, oh, by the way, we restricted this, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah, exactly.
they've covered their SQL injection bases as well and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting.
Along those same lines, I had a really interesting question I never thought of before when I was going through my Canvas app presentation, and it's like, is there anything to minify the PowerFX code? I was like, wait, what? Wait, oh, I was like, wait, it just compiled into JavaScript, so that's got to be minified. So no, I don't worry about that. If your PowerFX is running slow because your formula is really big, you've got other problems. But I never even thought of asking that question, so that was just an interesting idea.
I guess maybe.
Right? I don't know.
I guess maybe another use obfuscation to actually just remove all the variable names to do A, B, C, D, so people can't understand it if you want to deliver it outside something along those lines. But yeah, then you're in a whole new ball game as well. I probably don't want to do that either. Yeah.
Definitely not.
Well, maybe we need to get Greg or Mike to come on and sort of tell us about what's going on in the background there, in terms of the Canvas apps and how it works. And if indeed, is it compiling, or is it doing interpreting, or is it some kind of weird combination of both, and because it would be perhaps an interesting topic to cover.
And also, if it's used, if you're using the library as a third party in a C# application, what can it output? Can it output and just compile straight to .NET? So you don't need to have it's only a compilation. It's only used. It's not even used at runtime. It's just a means to generate something. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it'd be definitely interesting. I'll be listening.
Yeah. Because it's like regular expressions, isn't there's a way of compiling a regular expression into an actual optimized. I don't know what it does. I mean, I've never really looked at it, but you kind of get the feeling that it's actually creates some kind of dynamic function that's optimized, rather than just constantly looking at that text string and trying to interpret it every single time you run it.
Isn't it just parsing it to something, and that's so it doesn't have to re-parse it each time? I thought that was kind of what it did, but
I don't know. I've not looked at underneath the covers of it. You kind of feel as though there should be some kind of way of creating some kind of some sort of function that .NET function that you could then run a lot more optimized than just simply a interpreted, even if it is parsed and with a tree but it would still have to. Although I suppose that a regular expression by very nature is a sort of sequential process, isn't it? It kind of starts and it moves a cursor around in your string to actually perform operations. But that is literally as about of a tangent I think that we've ever got onto.
Here we dive into how regular expression parsing works. Great, highly entertaining episode. Highly entertaining. Also, I love the fact that Scott has an RSS feed that is subscribed to the PowerFX RSS feed. And he mentioned it like it was something that most everyone does. And how many feeds do you subscribe to, Scott? Like how much of your day do you go through GitHub RSS feeds?
It's like Phil says, it's the fire hose, right? You can trying to absorb it.
I guess so. Interesting. I guess I never even thought of doing that, and now that I think about it, like I don't think I can handle that fire hose. That's too much for me.
Just on the note actually of later releases, because that's where you can see all the latest bits and bits and bobs that are coming through into PowerFx. There is the NuGet packages that are published. There have been published 3 of them now, I think, 0.21, 0.21, 0.22, 0.23. There's a latest nightly release on the PowerFx site, so if you ever want to get the latest and greatest, have a play with it, then it's on there to incorporate into whatever you're doing. So that's it. Cool. If for external users anyway.
Cool. Yeah, that's really neat.
Well, Phil, are there any other ways you've been using using PowerFx or anything else that you tried and you failed at, but you're like, I think I'm almost there, or anything we're missing that you want to talk about before we have to sign off here?
Before I did try and abuse it beforehand when it was in Canvas apps only. I tried to create prime number calculator out of it. Very, very not performant. Don't recommend doing that. But that's just trying to learn. Again, it's can I do this, and seeing how I mean, Scott uses lemmings. I just use a few prime numbers, but yeah, it's you can find out where what it's not good at, and what it's good at, and it's good at being easy to understand expressions to write and combine with other bits like if it's to do with displaying a label or making a Canvas app come to life, then that's where it's really, I think it's really easy to understand formulas that are really good. I think and it's simple to understand, and I really like the use of it in the new test suite as well. PowerFx is in the test engine, which is like, ooh, that's quite interesting. So
what test engine? What test suite? What am I missing?
So it was only last week or so, a week or so ago, that Microsoft announced the test engine, and it's on GitHub. It's open source. But to that, at the moment, it can test a Canvas app, and you give it a test script in YAML, but the YAML has got PowerFx statements in there. So go and open my app, press a button, does something happen, assert on it, and take screenshots. So all of that is written in PowerFx. First, the PowerFx is seeping everywhere in the platform. You can't avoid it. So I think it's definitely something to learn and keep on top of.
It's funny that the whole platform has been pushing for years to be no code, and now they just said, no, we'll just do low code. We'll low code everything, just because I think you need a knife sometimes, you need a hammer sometimes, and you need a scissors sometimes, and trying to handle every single one of those things is very, very difficult and time-consuming and expensive. But giving them just a little bit of code, a little bit of way to be able to express something is extremely, extremely powerful. So, even
if it's just to be able to copy and paste stuff. I mean, honestly, copy and paste is literally the thing that I think everyone goes, well, I should be able to do that. Should be able to copy and paste. Why can't I copy and paste? I've just spent like 45 minutes making this no code thing, and now you're telling me I can't move it to over there,
Well, Phil, thanks for playing around with things and spending time struggling. I'm sure it wasn't, I've got 20 minutes, I'll figure this out. I'm sure it took far longer than that. And I appreciate you spending the time doing it and blogging about it, and me going, oh, that's interesting. I always like hearing that's an interesting idea. That's an interesting thought. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for continuing to contribute to the community. I appreciate it, man.
And I really look forward to the next installment in what you're going to do. Where are you going to go with this? Because now, Phil, right? Now this is your thing. This is your bag. Because everyone has that little thing that they do, and it's like, now you are Phil. You are the PowerFX sticking it where it shouldn't be kind of person.
Phil sticking PowerFX where it doesn't belong. Coal. Yes, that's going to be
on PowerFX.
Well, Phil, if anybody has any questions or they want to know, maybe they go through your blog and they'd like to contact you, what's the best way for our listeners to get a hold of you?
Probably LinkedIn is probably the best way of getting hold of me. Mention where you come from, mention how you've heard of me. or whatever, so that it's not just a blank invite. And then that's the way. That's the best way, I think.
I love that you say that, because that's exactly what I do all the time. And even at the conference, I'm literally at the top of the screen. Feel free to reach out to me to LinkedIn. Please put a message in there so I know where you came from. And I still have people that fail. I'm like, oh, just one little thing. But no, they usually always. I have a copy paste I do of how do I know? How do you know me? And I just give that big thing to them, and then they will.
But now you're going to get hundreds of people, Phil, saying, "I saw you on the XrmToolCast."
Yes. You're gonna have to move. You have to change your address.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's gonna be crazy.
One of your listeners is on the show, so I don't know.
Oh no! Now what do we do? That's tricky. Do you count as a listener? If you actually
every time you download, you count as a listener, Scott.
No. We're going to go with it. It's fine. You can be a listener as well while you're on the.
Well, Scott, that's how our listeners can get hold of our guests. How can our listeners get hold of us?
Well, Daryl, yes, you can email us, cast@xrmtoolbox.com. And you can also get us on LinkedIn, Twitter @XrmToolCast. And yeah, please get in touch. Let us know if you'd like any other places to stick PowerFx so that Phil can do that.
Yeah,
but
give us
yeah,
some suggestions. That'd be great.
Exactly.
Tell Phil where he should stick it. It's great.
Yes, go stick your PowerFx. But it's been really, really great, Phil. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's just felt so relaxed, and feels like we could just go on chatting for another hour, but probably people might tune out. So
Phil probably has to go to bed at some point in time too.
So. Yeah, we appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It's very, very fun as well. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. See you later, Phil.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Cheers then.
Bye.
This has been the XrmToolCast with Daryl and Scott Darrell, produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @XrmToolCast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XrmToolCast page.